What's going on, guys? It is Grego Gallagher with the Road Trip Podcast, and I have on the call Brad Pilon. You guys probably know his stuff. He wrote the Eat, Stop, Eat book, and I know on the podcast I talk a lot about intermittent fasting. Well, Brad Pilon's one of the grandfathers of really bringing it to the mainstream. So
Man.
it's a pleasure to have him on. How are you today?
Good, man. I thought you said the road trip podcast, and I was like, this is going to be epic. And then I realized Road to Rip, which is just as cool. But, I thought for a minute we were going somewhere.
Everyone tells me that. All my listeners are like, "Wait, Gregory, do you call it the Road Trip Podcast?" Yeah, I don't know. When I say it quick, and it just turns into Road Trip Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to enunciate more next time. I'm gonna have to do that pause.
Road to Rip.
1, 2, 2, 1, 2.
Oh,
Anyways, so how's it going today?
it is going cold. We're both up here in Canada, and for you non-Canadian listeners, it's cold.
And
It sounds like I'm whining, but it's cold. No one likes this, so.
right. They can even relate because we use Celsius and they use Fahrenheit. So if you were to spell out numbers, they'd be like, "What is that?"
Oh, I like scaring them. I'm like, it's close to -5, and they all go, "Holy cow!" I'm like, well, "Not leave, right?" Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, so I'm making do. I'm in the basement, and I'm sort of just this is my writing time, right? So during the summer when it's nice out, like to get outside, do a lot of working on the business. The minute the snow hits the ground, I bunker down, and that's when I start see if I can't get some new ideas going and that kind of thing. So I'm in my pajamas all day, writing all day, kind of set.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you've had some really awesome blog posts over the last few months at bradpilon.com, and so there's a few of them that I want to bring up because I think they're really ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. And the first place we'll start today is the whole concept of why do we have this obesity problem? Why are there so many overweight people? I mean, we're spending so much money and so much time to figure out and conquer this issue. So, why is it happening?
Yeah, I like that question, and the reason I like it is because instantly we like to dive into like hormones or enzymes or bacteria or all these things going on, and I sit there thinking, like sugar, fat, whatever it is, it can't make you fat unless you eat it, right? So a pile of sugar on the table beside me is not going to like jump down my throat. So it has a lot to do with why we eat. It's always been why we eat, right? So I read a really interesting quote, and I think it kind of sums up the situation really well, is that at any given meal, at any given time, any given person could have eaten more. Right? So we're not just gorging until we can't stop, and then, like we just, oh God, I can't eat anymore, then we take a break, then we go back at it. It was like Louis C.K. or one of those guys, I think it was Louis C.K., he was like, the meal's not over when I'm full, the meal's over when I hate myself, right?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, but it's not entirely true because, with the exception of, you go to a wedding or a buffet where you eat until you're kind of almost embarrassed that you're still eating, every other meal it seems like you could have eaten a bit more. Like I just had a pita. I could go back and have another pita. Like I'm not so full I can't eat. So there's just a small disconnect between how much I need to eat and how much I'm eating. And it's not giant, right? Like with the exception of the people on The Biggest Loser, most people in North America are walking around at 400 and 500 pounds, right? Where we're overweight, but we're not like grotesquely out of control, can't stop eating, gaining pounds every week type of thing. So the issue is why this little amount of overeating, and is it that we're doing a little bit of extra every day, or is it that for our friends down south we have damaging periods, right? So from basically Thanksgiving until New Year's, most people in the States, I imagine, gain a fair amount of weight, right? And then do they lose it over the course of the other, especially with Valentine's Day is associated with chocolate, so is Easter, so is, it just keeps coming up in the summer barbecue season. So there's always these little chunks of overeating, but we don't really have these holidays where we're like, all right, like, well, the majority of us really don't do the holidays where we're like, yeah, we're not going to eat for a couple weeks, right? Like to make up for it. Those holidays don't exist. So then we're just left with, okay, we have periods where it's socially acceptable, and not just socially acceptable to overeat, but socially unacceptable to not overeat, right? Like you don't go to your American friend's Thanksgiving and be like, no, I'll just have salad, dude, and no beer. And watch football? No, I'm gonna go work out. Like you don't do that, right? That'd be rude. So we have these periods that it's socially unacceptable not to overeat, combined with I think there's a little bit of overeating all the time, and it just sort of adds up. And we blame the food all the time, and we argue over whether it's carbs, whether it's fats, whether it's the carbs in our fats or the fats in our carbs, and you sit there going, I can find you an example online of someone who's lost weight eating anything, right? I can find you the vegan, I can find you the paleo, I can find you, Kane down in Toronto.
Oreo.
Pop-Tarts and ice cream. There's this, the wacky long-haired guy who fasts. Like, we've got literally any possible way of losing weight, someone's had success with it, right? So you can't just blame one food group in totality. You can't be just like, it's sugar. It's done, right? This discussion is over. Sugar's making everybody fat. Thank you. I'm now going to do my documentary on TV with some celebrity on sugar, right? It just isn't that simple, because the issue isn't just the one macronutrient, the one cause. It's the fact that we're somehow eating more. And the argument is like, well, we could be just exercising a lot more, and that would be awesome. Pretty sure if most of us just stopped to exercise off the weight and ate whatever we want, the economy would collapse because nobody would be at work, right? So it's for everybody who's like, well, everybody can find time for an hour a day. I would argue that a lot of people who find time for an hour a day of exercise still don't lose weight, right? So
that's a very real phenomenon. I mean, in an hour, maybe you burn 600 calories, and that can be walked down.
Post-workout shake.
Yeah, post-workout shake right there. And I even heard, like, women, like the research on women and them exercising, it makes very little difference. It tends to increase their appetite to some degree.
I feel sorry for them in general, poor girls, because we're bigger, right? So, you're 5'10", right? Somewhere around there. So you go to lunch with your friend who's 5'1", right? She eats the same thing you eat.
Right.
You're overweight, right? Like, in fact, like, it gets to the point where you could eat a big meal, and she could eat that same one with you, and that could be her day's calories.
Yeah. I go with my girlfriend. I usually order like 3 times as much food. So.
Yeah. Right.
Like 9 slices. She'll have like 2 or 3. Yeah.
So the issue really comes down to, why is there an obesity epidemic? Is because we like to eat. I mean, it's enjoyable, right? Eating is one of the few pleasures everybody kind of has control of in their life. Right, like even at work, you could probably sneak out really quickly, get a coffee and a donut, no one think anything weird about it, right? Like it's one of the few things you can do. You can do it anywhere. You can't, for you smokers, you can't smoke on an airplane, but I can pound back a Snickers bar, right? Like, so it's one of the few things that you have control over that will make you happy for a short period of time, that you can kind of do whenever. And it's socially acceptable now to do whenever. I mean, in our grandparents' day, you ate in the kitchen and that was it, right? Now we can eat in a car, in a library, in a bookstore, anywhere, walking down the street. It doesn't matter. It's okay to eat there. In movie theaters, you eat, right? Like, I'm pretty sure, I've been out of school for a while, but I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't be weird for you to pull out something and start eating in the middle of a lecture, right? Like, you can do it anywhere. And it does kind of make you feel a little bit better, right? Like, it's, especially if you've been trying not to eat something, there's a certain amount of pleasure then in eating that thing. So it's very much a mental battle. It's very hard to accept the idea that you've got to eat a little less than you want, right? That it's all there in front of you, and you can't have it all. And you can eat whatever you want, just not as much of it. And it's your job as a responsible adult to kind of figure out, okay, I'm not going to have the Pop-Tarts, because if I have one, I'll have like 8. But I can totally have a brownie because I'm not really a chocolate person. I can eat one and be happy with it, right? So you've got to play with those numbers. But if you just kind of go with, I'll eat what I want when I want, I mean, that's what everybody's already doing, and that's why we're in an obesity epidemic. And the issue there is that sort of that feeling of deservism, right? Like, well, Greg's lean, and he gets to eat whatever he wants. So I get to eat whatever I want too. It's that kind of thing, right? And I have no idea that, like, you know, actually, you know, you've been dieting hard for 3 weeks and you just took the one day off that I got to run into you, right? I see you eating, well, that's not fair, right? Or, you know, I'm looking at your Instagram posts of all these foods you're eating, and you're not eating it all, but I think you are, because I'm only seeing the 1 or 2 pictures you put up a day. I think that's what you're eating all day. It's not fair, so I want to do it too, right? Or simply that person's just not lean or slowly gaining, slowly losing. You don't know, right? But that deservism, that feeling that you get to eat it too because everybody else is, just isn't fair. What I like to tell people is, like, if you were one of the people who could eat whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, still stay lean, you'd already know. You'd know you were that person, and you probably wouldn't be online looking for fitness advice. So you're not that person, then we got to work within the kind of realms of your reality.
Perfect. Yeah, and I like what you I mean, that's something that someone's just gonna have to accept, you know, like right now, because there are always going to be those people that really don't have to think about it at all. They just eat whatever they want, and they end up in energy balance or what have you. But I like also I like what you brought up earlier about you have to sort of be conscious and figure out, like, yes, you can have the foods that you want, but within moderation. And if one Pop-Tart is going to lead you to eating 8 Pop-Tarts, that's a realization you have to make, so you don't make that decision. If you can't control yourself with one, then leave that out. But if, like, brownies or some other food, I've been doing is I actually people are going to laugh when they hear this, but I actually take, like, if I'm going to have dessert, I might just take it to bed that night when I'm, like, really tired. Because once I'm in bed, I'm not going to go downstairs to my kitchen and get another dessert. So I'll bring a bowl of ice cream into my bed and watch Netflix. And you know what? That's
amazing. That has to be an ebook. You and I are going to write that one together.
Take it to bed.
Done. No, I feel you on that though, and I see where you're going, because you know what, I have a really good time controlling my diet during December, and I contribute it solely to the Advent calendar. You know, that little calendar, you get a little chocolate a day, and you run down. Yeah. So we have that in my house, right? And so every morning I start with a chocolate, except for the days I'm fasting. That's what I start with. And it kind of gets it out of the way. It's a little piece of chocolate. I got the taste, and I'm like, I'm happy. Let's go. And that's all it took. Whereas, you know, when on those times when I've tried those real restrictive diets where you're just not allowed to eat the foods you like, that's the point of that. That sucks, right? And then you end up eating the foods you like because they're the foods you like, right? So I get it. I get the idea of taking the stuff that you like to bed, because you're playing in part with the foods you really like, and your laziness, you're not getting back out of bed again. So.
Yeah, it's perfect. And, you know, as you were talking about just a second ago, I mean, it's crazy today that people still are, like, throwing out, like, the whole good food, bad food carb. Oh, like, you need to eat clean food to lose weight. And you were you know, from all the people I used to read about, like, years ago, I mean, you were the first person, like, this must have been 4 or 5 years ago, I think. You're the first person to kind of, for me to see at least, to be like, we should not be talking about this good food, bad thing. This is not the problem. And I was kind of, when I first came across that, I was still kind of in the like the clean eating kind of aspect, as like 99.9% of everyone was. And then, like, that kind of opened up my eyes a lot. And so now, over the last few years, it's like this is not the issue. This is not what we should be talking about.
It actually makes it worse. There's a giant body of research on something called restrained eating, right? So, and it looks at what happens when you categorize foods as good foods and bad foods, and then you take the bad foods, you're like, I'm never going to eat them, right? And just all these really weird things happen. First off, you get this halo effect, right, where people who are doing the good food, bad food thing versus people who aren't doing that. And you ask them, all right, I'm going to take you for a day. You're just going to eat whatever you want, right? I'm just going to track it. And then at the end of the day, I just want you to estimate how much you ate, right? And so the people who were just, they're not dieting, they don't think foods are good or bad. They're like, you know, I had about 1,800 calories. And they had like 2,200, right? The people who think they got this good food, bad food thing down, they're like, I had like 17. And they had like 2,700, right? They put this halo around the good foods where they must be lower calorie. And even if they're not lower calorie, they must be good for you somehow, so they don't really count, right? Like, I'll find a way to make sure that my avocado, because of the good oils, doesn't really count fully, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So they end up underestimating the total calorie count because they're overemphasizing the benefit or the goodness of it. And the other thing that happens is like, okay, so for you and me, we go out, we grab a coffee. I'm like, I want to grab a brownie. You're like, sure. We have brownie. It's done. For someone who's been really restrained and they fight, they go for coffee like, I'm not gonna have a brownie. I'm not gonna have a brownie. I'm not gonna have a brownie. Person behind the counter is like, do you want a brownie? They're fine. They eat that brownie and it's game on, right? They're like, hey, I've screwed my diet up. It's over. I may as well just order every brownie here, and then I'm gonna get pizza on the way home, right? And then I'm gonna get ice cream. And then 2 weeks later, they start their diet back up again. Only now they're even going to be more strict, right? Because it was the coffee that caused them to have the brownies. They're never having coffee again. It's in the bad food list, right? So all these things start whirlwinding around where just by giving food the label of bad or evil or forbidden, you kind of set yourself up to fail, right? You're taking the one thing you really want, you're saying, I'm never going to have that, instead of trying to find a way to do it in moderation. And for a lot of people, that just sets up this like very vicious cycle of every time you fail, you take a couple of foods from this good list and you flip them back over to the bad list. And if you went by online wisdom, there isn't a food in existence that shouldn't be in the bad list, right? Because you've got all carbs, all fats, proteins, animal meats, dairy, right? Like no matter who you talk to, there's something you could stick into that bad food forbidden pile. So then what you end up doing, you just start cycling through. You're like, okay, I'm going to now, dairy is good, but carbs are bad, and you're like, oh, okay, that didn't work. Carbs are good, dairy is bad, and so you're just cycling, constantly cycling, and then you're in this never-ending whirlwind of trying to figure out what's good and bad, and you're never losing weight. So I forget all of that.
Yeah, that is a really important thing for people to just kind of realize and understand right now, and I see this phenomenon where you have the good food, bad food kind of paradigm, and so someone will go out to a restaurant and they're like, you know what, I got the salad so I can have a dessert.
Yes.
Behold, the salad maybe had 700-800 calories, and if you really want the dessert, just skip the salad, have your entree, and then have a dessert instead of
just get the dessert.
Yeah, dessert. Yeah. Instead of eat more food so you can eat dessert, because that just digs you in a hole. And then
exactly.
I've seen this phenomenon with myself because years and years ago, I first started with bad advice, like everyone, and you just get to this point where you're depriving yourself from the foods that you really want. Obviously, that's not fun. But then when you give in, as we all do, we're only human. We can't control ourselves, and so I'd wonder this. So I like literally when I broke, I'd be like gaining weight, and I just think back. I'm like, well, before I started trying to cut and diet, I wasn't gaining weight when I ate ice cream. Like it was very, very slow and minuscule. But like now I can't control myself. Like what changed? And it was
ice cream for 2 months, right?
Yeah. And so it's the psychological impact of it all, and I guess what would your advice be for someone that is stuck in this good food, kind of bad food paradigm? Like, how do you break free of it and start to eat foods that you enjoy, sort of in moderation?
It's hard, right? Because now you're just asking people to change their mindset. You're asking them, okay, so like I know you've labeled a food as forbidden or evil. How do you get them to break out of that? Like, I guess it's just to try it slowly. Is it just to kind of accept the idea that posit to them, what if there aren't good food, bad foods? What if you can have that and lose weight, right? Because people are doing that quite successfully. So maybe you can too, right? Let's try to sneak it into there. You don't want to scare them with the whole restrained eating thing right off the bat and talk about, well, when you have a brownie, you're going to just blow up and you're going to eat all the brownies. You don't want to do that to the person, but you just kind of want to. It's one of those ones, actually, to tell you honest truth, you just got to lead by example, and hopefully people see you doing it, right, and see more people doing it. They think, okay, maybe this is okay, because it's hard to have your beliefs thrown back in your face, right? So, good foods, bad foods, that concept is very much a concept that's held up by the pillars of food marketing, right? So the way my cereal is going to sell better than your cereal is my cereal is healthy, yours is not. Cereal doesn't sell on it tastes better anymore, right? Foods have food claims for a reason, right? And the food claims aren't like this one tastes way better than that one, right? We don't sell cookies anymore based on like back when we were kids, it's like 3 times the chocolate chips, right? We're like now it's gluten free or it's cane sugar only. You know, there's a sort of health component. So your concept of good foods and bad foods is very much driven by consumer demand and the marketing of foods. I think maybe starting with a message like that, again, might even be too harsh. I think the best thing to do is lead by example, because no matter what, if you say it even slightly with the wrong tone, you're just attacking their beliefs. And once you've done that, no one's just gonna all of a sudden be like, oh, Greg, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you know, once they feel like their belief system, because nowadays nutrition is a belief system, and it's a hardcore, I will fight you belief system. So if you take a couple, what someone else perceives as pot shots at it, they're just going to just dig their feet in even more. So it's more just showing people it's possible rather than telling people it's possible.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And some people are so obtuse in their beliefs where there's no changing them.
No.
It's like not going to happen.
But you know what kills me? They eventually change. Have you noticed that? So you're die-hard Bill Clinton, a couple other like celebrities who like they felt the best they've ever felt in their life when they went vegan, like, and they paraded around vegan, and now all of a sudden they feel the best they've ever felt in their life paleo. And I'm like, dude, you couldn't pick two more like polar opposite approaches. I'm like, how about you just say, I feel the best when I'm actually paying attention to what I eat, because that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? So they're not going to change because of you, but then they're going to make a radical flip, and they don't just flip a little bit. It's not like a moderate, I'm still vegan, but now I eat a little bit of meat. It's like, I'm paleo. Right? Like, so these giant jumps back and forth. So you got to let the people flow with it and go through the discovery process. I mean, what I've learned now that I've kind of like an online vet, I guess you could say, and my age is sad, is that what I watch is that people come into the scene, and they come in very brash and very aggressive, and they're on their blogs, and they're calling people out, and they're trying to make a name for themselves. And they go through the same learning process everybody goes through, right? Like, I'll be honest, when 2005, like, I called out Tom Venuto on a blog, and Tom, like, now I know that Tom's one of the nicest guys out there, and he really tries, and his information is really good, and we just had a like slight disagreement on like semantics. Like, it wasn't anything, and I'm like, I'm gonna get it, right? Like, this is cool. And then, you know, looking back at it, I was like, oh, he's such a child, right? And exactly what it was. But you watch everybody online go through the exact same learning process of like, I'm completely right. Okay, I'm right, and that guy's right. Okay, well, I see now that guy's point of view. Like, oh, well, wow, there's a lot of ways to do this, right? So if that's what everybody online is doing, that's what everybody in fitness in general is doing, in nutrition, right? They're going to grab onto something the first time, and it's going to be right. It's going to be the only right. And then they expand from there. So you just got to help them, lead them on their way rather than trying to force it to move faster.
It's almost like in this day and age when, because I mean, obviously, well, I was going to say, I don't know what it's like with you, but like, obviously, you live very, very close to me. You're in Ontario. Like, religion is not as popular as it was, 50 years ago.
Not a speaking point, yeah. It's impolite to bring it up in sort of like random everyday conversation, right? So, but nutrition, I can't go more than 20 minutes at a Starbucks trying to write without hearing like nutrition talk in the background of, and look over and it's a group of anybody, right? They could be 16-year-old dudes to like 7-year-old women, and they're discussing what nutrition is good for you, and everybody's free to have an opinion, everybody's free to have an expert opinion apparently, and everybody can just counter anything with like a they say, and then it's over. So
right.
Yeah.
It's almost like the nutrition is becoming like the new sort of like religion, like it's almost like held in like a religious way in terms of like your beliefs and they're wrong and that sort of thing. Which is, I think it's obviously important to become pragmatic. If something's working for you, great, but
people hate it. Like, it really, so eat, stop, eat, for instance, right? 24 hours ish, once or twice a week. So I like it. Like, if people think I can't do it 24, I say, okay, do 20, 21. Some people get really, really mad. They're like, no, what is it? Is it 24? I'm like, well, I'd like 24, please remember, but if you can only do 22, that's cool. Why is that cool? What, is 22 just as good as 20? Why? Like, they want it to be something. Like, even the amount of people who email me after buying Eat Stop Eat, and they're still, okay, is it once a week or twice a week? I'm like, it's once or twice a week. If you can do it every 5 days, that would work out to sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's two. Like, they need the specific rules, and those rules have to be like the rules for everybody, right? So when I say that, like, a guy who's really, really lean, like we're talking 6% body fat, probably does not want to nor need to fast for 24 hours. That guy may need to fast for like 18. But if you're really, average or overweight, so let's say anything above like 10, 12%, you can get away with 24, no problem, for guys. People have a hard time that, like, the rules are different for that guy than this guy. Like, so they really want, you're very right, a religion sort of feel to their nutrition rules, and they need it to be absolute carved in stone. And that's part of the problem too, is because then when other people bring up other ideas, if they're not exactly the same as your idea, they suck, right? And that's why you're missing out on the fact that it is very flexible, and it is very, you have to find out, as foo-foo as it sounds, what works for you, and then you stick with it.
Cool, man. Now, sort of switching gears a little bit, I know you've been digging up in some research over the last little while related to gut health and what effect gut health has on metabolism, weight loss, and cravings. And so, I mean, what have you discovered there? Because this is a completely new area for me.
Yeah, this was really cool. This started from a conversation on, okay, take a group of people and you put them all in the calorie deficit, and you try your best to control their exercise and their daily movement and everything. They all lose weight, and they all lose close to the same amount, but they don't lose the same amount, right? There's a variation, right? So I may lose 7, you lost 5. And you really dig down, like, wow, it's really hard to figure out why, Pilon lost more than Greg. Is it like, Greg just must have lied about how much he ate? Or, what, he probably didn't move as much as he thinks he did. But I thought, okay, instead of just calling everybody a liar who doesn't lose exactly the amount you think they're going to lose, I'm like, let's look at other possibilities. And that's when we looked at the gut microbiome, or literally the trillions and trillions of bacteria that live in your gut, and in this sort of cool symbiotic relationship with you, that essentially are another organ within your body, and how that could possibly affect weight loss. Because, like I said, just by eating an apple, that apple's not in you yet. Right? It's just in a tube that's going through you, right? It has to make it through the tube, then it gets absorbed. And there's sort of a guardian at the gate, and then that's your bacteria. So what if we all have slightly different bacteria? And sure enough, we do. We geographically and through hereditary and through our environment, we all have slightly different bacteria. Could that affect weight loss and weight gain? Okay, well, what is something that we could look at that affects bacteria other than just, geography, etc.? Well, let's look at antibiotics. Let's look at something that actually gets rid of or kills large populations of bacteria. And we started looking at the research on antibiotic use and some sort of link towards weight gain, and sure enough, it's there. There is a definite link between certain times of your life when you use antibiotics, certain types of antibiotics, and your where'd you go? You still there?
Yep, I'm there.
Okay, I've got an unresponsive script, so I'm just going to ignore it and just keep on talking. Yeah. So then you're wondering, okay, so these people they take an antibiotic, and it affects their ability to lose weight and or gain weight at any given time in their life. It seems to be the best case scenario. The most obvious thing is that's because of the changes in the bacteria. So can we look at different people now with drastically different bacteria in their gut and see if there's a difference in insulin sensitivity or the way they absorb calories or the way they excrete calories or the way they create new types of macronutrients in their gut? And yes, you can. So what we really came up with is it's an organ just like any other organ in your body that can have an effect on your weight loss. Now, it's not going to override something, right? So you're not going to go into a calorie deficit but have really messed up bacteria and gain weight, right? And you're not going to go into like a giant surplus, but your bacteria is going to make you lose weight. It's a subtle thing, but it's an important thing. And what we found is that the antibiotic use plays a role, and that you oftentimes don't know you're using antibiotics. Because it's not just like it's in a pill anymore, right? Like triclosan, this one antibiotic, is in everything, right? You've got antibacterial mouthwash, toothpaste, cutting boards, clothing. It's sometimes put on as a spray on clothing in stores to keep it looking nice, and like everywhere, right? So you really are exposed to this stuff on.
Your meat, a lot of meat too, huh?
Thank you. Yeah. So just like everywhere. So one of the things that we found was that the case for bacterial and gut health supports the idea of eating less. In general, a lower calorie intake increases the diversity of your gut bacteria, and that tends to be a good thing, right? So, surprise, eating less is good for you. The other thing is that a intake of fermented foods, so I always say it wrong. I think it's kefir. Most people say kefir, yogurts, that kind of thing. It's good for you, and I think we kind of knew that. But also fruits and vegetables, right? So now we have a reason why, yes, you can eat whatever you'd like to lose weight, but it's just more evidence. It's probably a good idea to eat like an adult and eat the fruits and vegetables as well as the foods you love. And that was really what we came from this, is it was a good reason to argue for fermented foods and organic foods and fruits and vegetables as part of your approach to weight loss and health. And also just to be really cognizant of your antibiotic use. I mean, it became kind of scary. Whenever you do sort of large amounts of research, you kind of get kind of a little too into it. And what I found was that, man, the amount of evidence out there talking about the increased use of antibiotics leading to new strains of antibiotic-resistant bacteria just sort of confirmed my idea that, like, I will take an antibiotic when I'm sick. I don't need antibiotics in my hand wash, toothpaste, mouthwash, face wash, shampoo, meat. If I don't need it, I'm not going to take it. And that was a big takeaway from that. And that if you're having a difficult time losing weight, it's an area to explore. And that was another big takeaway. It's not just some sort of foo-foo random, quack doctor idea. It's something to consider.
Right, and improving your gut health, that would also have huge implications on your overall health.
Just overall health, yeah. The connections are being made. They're not conclusive, but nothing ever is in science. But in terms of gut health, and then other issues with whether it's diabetes or cardiovascular disease, etc. It's by means not the only contributing factor, but there seems to be a link. So when in doubt, take care of your gut like you would anything else in your body, basically.
Right. So essentially, eating less calories will help improve your gut health. Increasing fruits and vegetables and probiotic foods like kefir. Okay, cool. And then is there anything like that literally, and then also like all the antibiotics, trying to restrict the
intensity. Yeah, that would be the main one for me, is just really being aware of that one. Like you do not need, my apologies to the major toothpaste companies, an antibacterial toothpaste unless your doctor or your dentist told you need one, right? And it seems like it was really, really cool. I can remember where antibacterial was like the key claim you wanted on a product, from antibacterial wipes to antibacterial kitchen sanitizers to antibacterial cutting boards, right? And it's not quite as on vogue now, but it hit a peak where anything that could be antibacterial was, and you don't need that much antibiotics in your life.
Okay, so antibiotics kill like the good and bad bacteria.
Yeah, there are some that are selective, but I mean the stuff you're spraying on clothing, etc., isn't like a selective one specific for streptococcus, or it's just an antibacterial.
Yeah, got you. So actually, one thing I want to ask you is, earlier we were talking about good foods and bad foods, and really, if you're going to lose weight, it's about creating that calorie deficit. And many times, the belief that there's good foods, bad foods will not serve you. It will get you to gain weight because you can't control when you do eat bad foods, or get you to just eat more good foods because you feel like there are not as many calories there. But what do you have to say to someone who's like, well, for me it's not just about weight loss. I want to be like really healthy, so I don't think that I should, have cookies or ice cream even in moderation or something.
Yeah, it's a pretty wacky definition of health then, right? Like it's so to give you an idea, for the good food, bad food, and this is where it really gets borderline hypocritical, and I see the irony here, is that it's not an excuse to go out and be like, every day's the day after Halloween, right? I'm going to eat all the chocolate I want. It's more permission to eat kind of just like a traditional style of eating, right? Where you have your breakfast, and you have your lunch, and you have your dinner, and you have your dessert, and you have some snacks, there's tea time, and you have cookies, instead of the, chicken broccoli, chicken broccoli, chicken broccoli, egg whites. That kind of approach. So it's people take it kind of like the if it fits your macros concept, right? Where people try to prove that it's right by eating Pop-Tarts or cheesecake, and everybody assumes that they're suggesting you should only eat Pop-Tarts or cheesecake, right? Instead of it saying you can eat those foods. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the big thing there. So yeah, being healthy does involve making healthy food choices. That's for sure. Like that's not the only thing you do. It's really hard to, explain it without coming across incredibly hypocritical, right? Like I guess I don't want you to have Pop-Tarts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
That's not my goal, right? I just want you to kind of relax a bit. Like, I guess that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, I think like even just taking away that good bad food label, you tend to eat less junk because when you do eat junk, you.
Yeah.
Okay, and like, what do you think? Like, do you think it's like, let's say you have, what are your thoughts on, like, let's say you have two people, one person is like really lean, slim, and they have, quote unquote junk foods like, quite often. Some person is literally overweight, but they're eating predominantly just healthy, clean foods. I mean, would the lean person be healthier, or like based on like medical like research? It seems like when you're leaner, you just automatically have much healthier profiles.
Yeah, I would say that's a tricky one because you've got a lean person. Okay, so what I would say is that the overweight person would benefit the most from losing weight, right? So not a direct comparison between their always lean friend, but just they themselves would probably benefit more from losing weight. And I'm not talking like you don't need a 6-pack, a 4-pack, or even a 2-pack, right? Like just not very overweight. And then from there, the healthy foods do play a role. Really, you want both. I mean, if I had a choice between someone who's like, yeah, I'm going to eat to lose weight, and someone else is saying, okay, I'm going to try to just really pay attention to eating some healthy foods, I want them to do both, and that would be my ideal.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, I mean, like, this is a thing that I guess always happens is there's going to be like the scarecrow argument where someone's like, oh, you're saying you're allowed to eat brownies, so therefore you're telling us to eat brownies all day. It's like, no.
Yeah. Or they do the comparison of like, well, is it you're kind of like the one you just made, right? Where I'm like, well, let's just concentrate on the one person. And if they're very overweight, probably the best thing they could do would be to lose some of the weight, increase their activity, and eat healthy. But the number one thing is I'd like you to find a way to get the weight down. And again, I mean, you do not have to look like a fitness model to be healthy. In fact, I could argue that, probably that's almost too far sometimes, is just getting into sort of a normal weight. And then we're completely ignoring in all of this the psychological part of health and how your mentality plays into health and feeling comfortable and good about your body and how that helps you move forward, as opposed to what happens when you are really ashamed and stressed and anxious over your physical appearance and how that can affect your long-term health too, right? So there's multiple components to it.